Hello, and welcome to the first chapter of John. So in this chapter, like I'm sure many of you realize, we find out that Jesus is the Word. So let's dive right into the first chapter. So it starts, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him, nothing was made that was made. So here we have John recounting creation, but it's a slight difference. In the first chapter of Genesis, you'll see that God presents Adam and Eve a perfect world that's completed and that's finished. And when Adam and Eve fall, God, just like in Genesis, where God doesn't just leave them, God comes to find them. We have the same thing. We have the same thing here. But John's account is very specific, and it gives us, if you look at it, it gives us the distance that Christ traveled in order to save us, because John is talking about Christ in his eternal form in the first chapter. And so as we continue, it says that all things were made through him, and without him nothing was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men, and the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. So we see that just like in Genesis, there was the earth was void and darkness and light came, and that process was the process of God creating a perfect world. Well, in this story, we see the comparison that Christ is not only our creator, but he's our redeemer as well. And he traveled from being the Word to, as we know, he became flesh. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, and the world did not know him. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. I don't know how many people are aware, but when this says he came to his own, Jesus was coming to the Jews. And the Jews, like the rest of the people, did not recognize Christ, because by this time, men were following the courses of their own hearts. They became so blinded that they did not recognize Christ and his mission. They were following the desires of their own heart, and they had added and changed so much to the original purpose that in this chapter, in this part, as we continue, we see, and this is my favorite verse in the entire chapter, and this is when we get to verse 12. But as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, to those who believe in his name, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And it's at this time that these Jews, the Sadducees, the Pharisees, they had elevated themselves to high positions in the ministry based on their bloodline, based on the simple fact that they were Jews. While what they were doing, they were actually oppressing other people. So it's like the word says, God had to come. And finally, we get to the point where it's almost the culmination of the first chapter. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. John bore witness of him and cried out, saying, "This was he of whom I said." So the last verse that I read, "This was he of whom I said," this is validating, not necessarily validating John's ministry, but it's showing that John's ministry was other-centered, and it was a part of God's plan. And the part in the verse where it says, and we beheld the glory as the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. Because of the sad condition that humans were in at this time, and the human race really needed grace. And because at this time, the Jews had put so much oppression on the people, because they were following the hard dictates of the Old Testament. So they said, we all know that was not God's original intent. So Christ came with grace and truth. And so we'll end with this verse where it says, and we beheld his glory, the glory as the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. And it's here that the people were still, after everything that happened, were still expecting, this Messiah to come and elevate Israel above all other people, whereas Christ was the only begotten of the Father, the express image of God. Everything that God planned for us, that he hoped for us, Jesus is that picture. So here, finishing up, so here we have Jesus being the express image of God and his desire to save us. I hope you enjoy the rest of the chapters. May God bless you.